What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods, and we're coming at you with another episode today, and it continues our Big 10 in 31 days theme. And we're joined by someone who I think probably has very little time to sleep based on everything he does. I mean, he's a sports anchor, play-by-play broadcaster for Learfield IMG College Ohio State Radio Network, and the voice of Ohio State baseball and women's basketball, along with being the sideline reporter for Ohio State football. Matt Andrews is joining us today. So I just wanted to say I appreciate you taking your time out of your schedule to come on here.
Zach, happy to. I hope you all are doing well. And it's a lot going on, but it's better to be more going on now than where we were a few months ago with hardly anything going on and very little travel right now. So that's actually a really good time.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully everything starts kind of picking back up. I know a report came out yesterday that a lot of the SEC programs were looking to have full stadiums this fall, promising, but we'll see kind of what goes on with the vaccine and the outlook for COVID. But let's start with this hectic season that you were just speaking of for Ohio State, the Big Ten, the entire country. The Buckeyes make a national championship run, come up a game short against Alabama. But in terms of what you were expecting from Justin Fields and this team, did this season exceed, fall short of, or meet your preseason expectations?
Well, obviously, they would have loved to have won one more game. Aside from all of that, with the, in my opinion, lack of Big Ten leadership at the top, with the uncertainty of where we have been in our whole world with everything, I think this was a season for Ohio State fans and for football fans in the Buckeye State that exceeded expectations. Now, had they lost that semifinal game to Clemson, we'd probably be talking about something different. But getting that monkey off the proverbial back, Woody Hayes didn't beat Clemson. Urban Meyer didn't beat Clemson. Ryan Day failed once, got it done this time. So that was big. That was big, for Ohio State fans. The Alabama game obviously is a different story, but just to get to the season, look, I don't think the Big Ten was going to play football this year. You remember the nonsense they were talking about, we're going to have a spring season. Well, that would have been now.
Yeah.
But when they realized that the SEC, that the Big 12, that the ACC, they weren't budging from their stance. They were going to play. Kevin Warren had some mud on his face in terms of the decision that was made as hastily as it was, and then would not be revisited. Well, we revisited immediately immediately being within a few weeks. So just there was a lot of pressure here. Obviously, they knew the kind of team they had. Buckeye fans wanted to see this team. You mentioned Justin Fields. Justin Fields exceeded my expectations in 2 years here. I knew he was a good quarterback. Obviously, we knew what he was recruited to do at Georgia, transferred to Ohio State. But I really enjoyed him. I don't understand right now. We're kind of in this weird world of the NFL where people are now questioning all of a sudden why he wasn't at a different level. Well, the receivers are running open. He threw him the ball. He had 2 bad games in 2 years, and he won both of those games. Let's not forget that. I mean, the pass he made against Clemson in the semifinals 2 years ago was a ball thrown to the spot. The receiver turned the other way. The game against Indiana here, Ohio State and Columbus this past year, he didn't play well. They won the game. The game in Indianapolis versus Northwestern, they won the game. He really didn't play well. That's the Trey Sermon record game. So really impressed with what he was able to do. Thought he and Ryan Day were a good fit. Buckeye fans always want more. They wanted that win over Bama. There's no doubt who won that game, the better team. But this is an Ohio State team and a program and a Ryan Day, I think, that has picked up very nicely from where Urban Meyer left it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think we both could agree here that any team in the country was going to lose to Alabama that night in the national championship. That team just with Devontae Smith and them. I mean, as an Auburn fan, I saw it firsthand too. But we didn't fare even as well as you guys did. So I know how talented that Bama team was. But I'm really interested in this controversy surrounding the season with the Big Ten. You mentioned Kevin Warren's decision. He releases an all-conference schedule. I believe it was 6 days later. Decides to postpone the season. says they won't be revisited. We see Nebraska, Iowa, Ohio State. A lot of these schools fight back on this decision. I mean, there were reports of Nebraska leaving. We just covered Nebraska yesterday. Apparently, it wasn't that serious, but they were going to play football. What were your thoughts on the decision by Kevin Warren? And was Ohio State going to fight behind the scenes to play football if he didn't reverse course?
Well, they were fighting behind the scenes to play football. And I think, and we saw a lot of the players and parents come out and speak about it. You mentioned Nebraska. And then what Iowa was doing was tremendous in helping get the sport. And a lot of it had to do, I know, politics right now, political says by governors. A lot of it had to do with that. But I think when the decision was made to, as you mentioned, just days after nuke the season, they thought everybody was going to follow them. Well, that didn't happen. And I was doing a lot of fill-in on our morning show, Morning Juice, which just actually launched that summer, this past summer. And the talk was nonstop. Bobby Carpenter was on our flagship, former Buckeye player, does some work with ESPN. Advocate every morning. It was nonstop. And the thing that bothered Ohio State people, I think, was the transparency of it all. Well, if you're voting this way, let's hear it and hear it why. And then he makes a statement, Warren makes a statement, doesn't want to revisit it, and then goes silent for weeks. That's what frustrated the people here because they knew what kind of football team they had. I think once we saw the Michigan schools kind of get on board of we're ready to play, Penn State was a little bit vocal. There was some uncertainty with other schools, Wisconsin. But ultimately, they go to these presidents again, and they realize that this was what they had to do and play the season. And they gave themselves no wiggle room with the schedule, which obviously was very controversial. Look, by the initial parameters of the season, Ohio State wasn't even going to be playing in the Big-10 championship game. Remember, 2 weeks before, when the decision was reversed to allow the team that was going to be the possible entrant into the playoff play in that Northwestern game. Look, credit Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald obviously now assigned that longer deal at Northwestern. He's perfect for that school. And they played Ohio State very tough. We didn't travel to any of these football games. The one event we have traveled to, believe it or not, football, hoops, since this all started on our radio team, I was actually in the state of Ohio driving to Cleveland to cover the Ohio State men on Big Ten Championship Saturday when the football team played. So I had the Ohio State UCLA hoops game. Didn't get to watch or be a part of the Northwestern game in Indianapolis, which my broadcast partners, Paul Keels, Jim Lachey, Skip Mossick, were calling from the studio in the basement of the Schottenstein Center, the basketball arena in Columbus. So it was a really wacky day. That's the only road game we've gone to because it was in the state of Ohio and we were permitted to travel in state. But we didn't go to the Big Ten championship game. There was nobody from us represented at the Sugar Bowl. We called that virtually, and the same goes for the national championship game. So it's been a pandemic full of not only a lot of Big Ten stuff, but we've had to change a lot of how we do. So very, very frustrating at times, very understandable, and just a chance now for us to hopefully move forward in a number of these areas, whether it be the way the games are broadcast and hopefully the way the Big Ten will view the way they play these next few seasons. As you mentioned, I also call baseball games here. And right now, I'm not sure we're going to be able to travel even to those. So until this until this school year, calendar year, so end of May or June, is up, I don't anticipate many changes for the way that the Big Ten has operated with their business.
Yeah, and I mean, there was even talk about, I don't know how true it was, but there were Alabama reports when we saw Nick Saban's daughter say Ohio State was going to try to postpone the game, and they were using COVID to heal Justin Fields.
She quickly went off Twitter after saying that. There's that.
Yeah, it
I don't know.
Bad take.
Look, obviously Ohio State was down players in the championship game.
Mm-hmm.
And I know y'all, with your audience, and there's some SEC people probably watching thinking, well, we had all this stuff too. Well, okay, great. But I'm not when did the testing stop? Like, that's the thing with Clemson, Clemson doesn't test 3 days before the game, yet they show up. The next thing you know, the game's over and Ohio State's gone home, won the game. And days later they got problems. So the
Yeah.
Big Ten's protocol and standards, I think, were set totally different. And again, I get it. That's fine. We're good with it. Not that I agree with it, but it is
Right.
what it was.
Yeah, and speaking of this narrative, there was a lot of talk about that Ohio State did not deserve a playoff spot. I mean, you heard it. I know the players said that they heard it and that they took it personally. Was there any doubt in your mind that Ohio State deserved a playoff spot? And why do you think people were so adamant about Ohio State not getting in compared to a team like Texas A&M, Cincinnati, or someone like that?
Well, Ohio State hadn't lost their games, and I realized they hadn't played the number of games that A&M had or whatever. But when you watch the Clemson game, I mean, is there any doubt? Now, on the flip side of that, people would say, well, did you see him play Alabama? That's right, but I'm not sure who was playing Bama well that night. Now, that being said, that was also a product problem of Ohio State. We heard it. We didn't care. We knew if they won their games, they were not going to be left out. Let's face it, a 7 or 8-0 Ohio State Big Ten champion is not going to be left out. You call it what you want. It's the brand, period.
Right.
That's just our opinion. That's my opinion, and that's how we saw it here. And they took that personal. I mean, this Dabo stuff, when Dabo just wouldn't shut up, Ohio State heard that, and he can say he didn't mean to hack him off or whatever. The reality is he did, and that bothered this team. And as I feared, this team put a lot into that Clemson win and had to get up for very, very good Alabama, much better than Clemson, Alabama. And that was going to be tough to do, and we saw it sure was.
It really was. And yeah, Dabo, I had him ranked outside, I believe, the top 10, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. And
he had him outside the 10.
It's
Which
just
there's very little logic to me for that, but to each their own.
It's just Dabo. That's what I always chalk it up to on the podcast. It's just Dabo. You take it for what it is. But National Signing Day for the 2021 cycle just wrapped up last month. The Buckeyes, the number 2 class in the country. It's an elite class. Huge pickups. Jack Sawyer is a grown man at 18 years old. I mean, a defensive end. Trevion Henderson, Kyle McCord, all big pieces. What were your biggest takeaways of this highly, highly touted class, and who do you think could contribute immediately?
Well, we've known it was going to be a pretty big class for a while. And about 5 months ago, it was rated above Bama, but Bama closed well, and so they get a little bit of the nod there at the end. So again, it's that Ohio State Bama push. You mentioned some of the names, but this class started with Jack Sawyer. And I'm not saying he's the number one at this class. He's the one that kind of helped mold this together, and his commitment very early to Ryan Day. I saw the young man play multiple high school games just at suburban Columbus here. He's going to be a player. Ohio State, very, very excited, as you mentioned. The other one that I'm very excited to see, and you mentioned McCord, but Trevion Henderson to me is going to be, I think, a kid that will come in. And I made some notes earlier just in looking at their depth chart and preparing for this, but I think Henderson's going to be a guy that will commit and immediately push for playing time at running back. Obviously, Master Teague is back for Ohio State. But those are the two to me. Now, obviously, the quarterback battle with Stroud and Miller, who are here, will welcome McCord for that. But you got to think that while that will be an open race, the guys that have been here will have a little bit of an inside step. I say that. But, Zach, I'm not real sure about how all of this is going to pan out, considering a year ago, Ohio State basically did not have a spring. They had 4 practices. So that time missed by those guys last year in spring ball, I think, is extremely important for them to try to get some of that back here. And they just announced today they're going to start spring practice March 17th March 19th with the spring game on April 17th. So we now have a date. We know what they're going to try to do. Let's keep in mind, these kids are going to be tested still. It's not like these tests are gone away. So again, and I'm not sure what that looks down in the South. Maybe the protocol is a little different, but that's still very much an issue here in terms of the testing.
Right. And, looking way into the future, you mentioned a quarterback battle, and it's going to get real complicated next year if things stay the same. I mean, the Buckeyes have the number 1 recruiting class right now in 2022 as well, and it's led by Quinn Ewers, man. And we've talked about him on the podcast, and this is one of those, I think it's safe to say, a generational type prospect of a dynasty type quarterback. I mean, he's one of the few prospects that has a perfect grade in 247 history. How big of a win is this for Ohio State to take a kid out of Texas's back pocket, bring him in when you already have people like CJ Stroud? And what is the buzz around Columbus, around campus about this kid next season?
Well, obviously, it's still a little bit early in terms of him getting here. But yes, when they got that commitment and the flip, I got to think that kind of was a backbreaker for Texas and Tom Herman at the time. Now, clearly, with Sark coming in, they've got a new commitment and a 5-star as well. But this name is big. Obviously, this commitment was big. The class is shaping up well. We're seeing incredible depth. Let's not be naive. You can't imagine all these kids in 2 years to still be on the same roster. And Lord knows how this is all going to go with the transfer portal, which to me is going to open up, and we've already seen it to this point. We mentioned Fields, obviously, and others, Trey Sermon as well. But this is going to open up a whole nother dimension to me in college football. I had a basketball coach on the record tell me it's already becoming the wild, wild west of college hoops. And I just can't imagine what it's going to be like here when you finally get to a point where you're able to sort down your rosters, you're able to get your recruits in here, you're able to have a full year or two, and you're going to have to recruit your own team. I mean, they're just a continuation of recruiting these kids. So to answer your question, the Quinn Ewers, obviously, it's a big get. It's a great get, and I think we've seen what Ryan Day can do with quarterbacks. There are a number of coaches in the country that are very similar and obviously getting these higher level players. But in terms of recruiting the quarterback, and right now Ohio State's Brian Hartline recruiting receivers, that's kind of another whole dimension right now for what they're doing recruiting, which has led them to a couple of highly rated classes. I think the thought here, honestly, was that Ohio State might have an issue with recruiting once Urban left. To me, Ryan Day has completely proven that to be false. I think that what he's been able to do and sell in this virtual world, look how we're doing this interview. You know, that's how I've done interviews with our players as well for a year now. But the way he's getting these recruits who haven't even visited this campus, it's remarkable to me what he's able to do. And as you said, it's just you can kind of see it moving on along, and that's fun stuff for us here in Columbus.
Yeah, I was shocked when I saw the commitment for Quinn Ewers. When I heard that he's going to Ohio State, I was like, just chalk it up. That's a college football playoff team immediately when this kid clicks. If he turns out, and this is one of those prospects like Trevor Lawrence, where I feel like he's as close to a guarantee as someone like Kurt Herbstreit has said before about a prospect.
Let me throw this out there. I mean, and that's the other thing we see here. And I'm not trying to to ruffle any feathers, but the recruiting outside of Ohio State in the league, in my opinion, has to get better for them to compete year in and year out for national championships, whether that's Ohio State or not. Because the Buckeyes are recruiting at a I believe an SEC level. I believe at a top tier program level, and I look around and you see Michigan doing it a little bit, and you see Wisconsin a little bit, and Penn State a little bit, and maybe a blue chipper here or there. I will say I'm even shocked Rutgers is recruiting better. But nobody right now is at the level that they need to be at, in my opinion, to compete year in and year out for the Buckeyes who've won 4 straight Big Ten titles. So that's just a thought.
Oh, I have plenty of thoughts about the rival in the Big Ten. I've been a known very tough Jim Harbaugh critic. We have time at the end. We could maybe address that a little bit. I've been called out for my Jim Harbaugh takes. I've been calling for his job for a year and a half now. But, looking ahead to 2021, you already mentioned Travion Henderson as a potential guy, but who are some players already on campus that could be potential breakout players next season?
Well, Jeremy Ruckert, the tight end, had a really fine year this year. Shocked everybody when he came back. So keep an eye on Ruckert. They're loaded at receiver. They've got everybody back. Olave, Wilson, Smith, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Shockingly, Olave came back. But that is a huge win. Now, clearly they have confidence whoever the quarterback's going to be, and obviously their coach to get them the football. Thayer Munford returning at left tackle. I'm not sure if you've seen any of the pro football focused college rankings, but at tackle, Munford was nearly flawless this year. Feeling is he could have gone pro, didn't. Coming back, the Buckeyes are going to have him and Nicholas Petit-Frere at tackles, two of the best in the Big Ten this year, and maybe in all of college football. So those guys coming back. The questions to me are obviously more on the defensive side. We saw the issue they had in terms of defensive backfield and a linebacker against Alabama. They've got another really good defensive front returning, and Haskell Garrett's back, an All-American. He opts to come back, so that's a huge boost for the Buckeyes. So those are a couple of names. Keep an eye on a young man here out of Columbus at an Orange High School, Olentangy Orange, and Zach Harrison, who played some at defensive end. He was a really highly recruited young man here that chose Ohio State over Michigan at the end. But Harrison is a guy that's been a little under the radar his first 2 years. I expect him to have a breakout type of year. And how they're going to handle this at linebacker, losing all three starters. So those are some of the questions, some of the concerns. Who might be that running back? We mentioned Henderson. Will it be Master Teague? There's a number of guys in that room. It's a full room. It's a room with talent, but they've got to get back, I think, to having that guy. And we saw it with Trey Sermon at the end of the year and how he was able to run, that they found that cowbell. And so while it's a full room at the running back, they've got to find somebody, whether it be Teague or Henderson, to be the main go-to guy.
Yeah, I'm excited to see a lot this Ohio State team. That Dion, like you said, has Haskell Garrett coming back, and you insert Jack Sawyer at the defensive end, and you got Zach Harrison, and
Tyler Friday, Tyreek Smith.
Yeah, it's gonna be a stout defense. Like the front seven is gonna be outstanding for the Buckeyes next year. But based on these breakout players, based on everyone returning, a schedule that's kind of tough. Oregon's probably going to be a very tough game, and I might even argue maybe the toughest game for the Buckeyes next year is this Oregon game. What is the ceiling and or floor going to be, in your opinion, right now for the 2021 Buckeyes team?
The ceiling here will always be to win them all. That's going to be the ceiling, to win them all, to go to the Rose Bowl, to go to the college football playoff, whatever it is. And 4 straight Big Ten titles, that's what their goal will be. Oregon, there's no question that will be a tough game here. That's one we really missed from going there last year. That would have been a lot of fun. It would have been interesting to see how much scarlet the Buckeye fans who travel as well as anybody would have put in that in that yellow and green stadium in Hudson. So hopefully that game will be rescheduled as we come up. The game at Indiana will be obviously one that they'll want terribly. They played Ohio State as well as anybody last year here in Columbus, losing that game. Remember now, for 2.5 quarters, that wasn't a ball game. But Michael Penix, how he brought them back, and then how it got very intriguing down the stretch in the third and fourth quarter, that was obviously a very, very impressive game. And then you always got to figure going to Ann Arbor, you never take that one for granted. Look, I'm a kid of the 90s. I watched John Cooper lose to that team as many times as anybody when he shouldn't have. You never know how they'll react, but Michigan's a different story. But again, at Indiana, to me, they'll open the year at Minnesota. I don't think that'll be a trap game, but breaking in a new quarterback, it'll be interesting. And then, yes, the Oregon game here in Columbus will obviously be the marquee one. Let's hope we play them all. Let's hope we can have some sort of capacity in terms of a stadium. I'm not sure we'll get there. I know what the folks at Tuscaloosa said a few days ago, but I'm not sure we're there yet here in Ohio. But we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, even I've been reading, I mean, even a 40-50% crowd would be amazing to see after a lot of stadiums had 0 to just friends and family. So that's probably less than 5%. I mean, and I want to shift to the environment of Columbus, Ohio Stadium. What makes this city, this stadium so unique, so special on game days?
Well, I think what makes the stadium unique, and when I went to school there in the late 90s, early 2000s, they were doing the add-on. You know, it's at 90,000 with the south stands. Well, now the south stands are permanent, closing in the horseshoe. There's the build-up around it, the amenities to it, the suites that have been added. That's taken it to another level. A home football Saturday in Columbus is a lot like any great home football Saturday in the South or anywhere in the country. It's about the tradition, the people, the excellence, the band. We have become a college town that now has a pro team or two in the Blue Jackets and the Crew, but we're still a college town, if that makes sense. The biggest game environments in Columbus, I've never been around anything like it. I'll never forget the one that really pops out to me is in the early 2000s when they hosted Texas and Vince Young year. The year Texas went on to win the title. A year later, the Buckeyes repaid the trip down to Austin and beat number one Texas then. But that game had the feel to me of a major national champion type Rose Bowl setup almost, where there were 100,000 people in the stadium and at least 50,000 outside around tailgates. So it's a unique place. If you don't grow up here and really follow it, you might not appreciate it as much, because I just feel like the history, you kind of, it's like that Notre Dame fight song. It kind of wakes up the echoes. You feel the great tradition and names from the past. You see the championships on the northeast corner of the end zone. You see the Heisman winners. It's a special place, and it makes it special, especially when you live it, when you grow up here, when you go through it. I'd put it up against any of the top 5 venues in the country on any Saturday. Obviously, if you're playing a MAC team on a Saturday, it's different than if you got a top 10 showdown. I used to love night games at the Horseshoe. I loathe them as a member of the broadcast crew because it's such a long day and the build-up.
Right.
And you'd rather play, to me and our crew, we'd rather play noon games and be able to get out of there and have your day. But the environment at night when Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield came in a few years ago, it's a real special thing. And my guess would be that Oregon would be a home night game here in 2021. Just a guess.
I hope so. I know you said you don't love those night games. I would love to see Oregon come in with those unique uniforms under the lights.
Yeah.
That'd be a game right there. But I have to ask you, so we got 2 questions left here. One of these is loaded. One of these is about your career. As an Auburn alum, we talked before the show that any list of the greatest rivalries has 2 games at the top, and whether they're 1 or 2, it depends on who you're asking, with the third being Army-Navy always coming right there behind. Iron Bowl versus the game, Michigan-Ohio State. Which are you taking and why?
But you think I'm an idiot? I'm taking the game. What, are you kidding me? So let me tell you about my times in the stadium for the game. And like I said, I've sat through a whole bunch of those damn gum losses in 1990 with Cooper losing to Michigan. But probably the greatest moment for me personally was in 98. Well, 98 was my first year there as a student for the game, as a freshman at Ohio State. But in 02, when Ohio State beat Michigan and John Navarre intercepting the last play to cap a perfect year to play Miami and win the national championship. My brother was a senior. I'm a senior that year. My brother was a sophomore on the team. So that's been fun. The 06 game, number 1, Ohio State, number 2, Michigan. I was convinced the Buckeyes were going to lose because Bo left us the day before, and it's just going to happen. He's going to will them, and God's going to find a way for Michigan to win the game with Bo's passing. And what a night, what a day! Buckeyes won 41-38. No, is that right? 42-39, 42-39. Yeah. And but yeah, the game. We can agree to disagree. It's fine, but it's just in the blood, man. It's special. Yeah, you got to put Army Navy in there too. I'm sure there's others, but for this sport, those have got to be certainly the top 2 or 3.
Yeah, I would say those are the top 3, and I would put Army Navy up there real high. That is one of my favorite games to watch. I
Gives
really
me chills.
Get there. Oh, it does every year. I don't care if they're both 0-11. That game's going on the TV, and I'm taking my day to watch that one. But last question here, man. You've been working the sports scene in Columbus for a long time now. You've been to Ohio State as a student. You've been as a fan. You've now worked for Ohio State. What is your favorite, most memorable moment since you have been at Ohio State covering games?
That's a good question. The atmosphere in 16, I returned back here to Columbus to do that. The atmosphere for the game in 17, when Oklahoma came to Columbus, was really good. Ohio State lost the game. Probably the win over Michigan in Urban's final home game. That was a cold day. It was a fun day. It was the first time I covered the game because the first 2 years I covered the game, I was on assignment doing men's basketball, filling in for Paul Keels on the road because the game was during a Buckeye basketball tournament. So those have been a couple of the memories. The Rose Bowl when Ohio State beat Washington a couple of years ago, that'd be probably at the top just in terms of non-Ohio State home games. The Rose Bowl is everything it's made out to be. To me, it's where every major game should be at the end of every year. Now, I get it. They got to spread it around. Miami was nice, whatever. New Orleans is good. But the Rose Bowl, as a kid in Buckeye Land, anytime you could be there, it's just a real privilege and pleasure.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I have been saying that for the longest time. Every single national championship should be played in the Rose Bowl. I was lucky enough to see Auburn play one of their championships. We lost that game. I would have loved to get a win in the Rose Bowl, but I'll take at least being there for once. But man, I had a blast on here talking all things Ohio State football. I'm going to give you a chance to plug all your social media, all the radio shows, where our fans can find broadcasts. So I'll give you some time to do that now.
Well, I'm on social media at Matty AOSU, but I'm kind of old school, man. If you can just tune in and listen, that's great. We love what we do. Ohio State baseball about to start, women's basketball, Buckeyes on OSU, IMG, Learfield College. The guys I work with in my crew are the best. Skip Mossick's our coordinating producer. Paul Keels, the voice of the Buckeyes. I've grown up listening to Paul forever. If you've not heard the man's tones, I mean, we're talking amazing, like on Eli Goldbar. I mean, this guy's got it. Jim Lachey, Skip Mossick, as mentioned. My crew's the best. My guys are the best. And Zach, man, I really just appreciate you letting me come on here and spread a little Buckeye love. Hopefully I didn't create too many haters. A lot of love. We all love college football. We need it. We really need it. And we need to get back to hopefully where we can all be right back where we want to be.
Hey, that's all I'm saying, man. We were stressing there for a few months. We're strictly college football podcast. We were like, what are we going to do without college football? We're going to have to cover something. And we had Paul on the podcast, I believe, just about over a year ago. We were just starting, and he took time out of his day to come on here and talk some Ohio State football. So he's a great dude, and we had a blast with him. But, man, I appreciate it. But, guys, this has been another episode in the Big 10 in 31 days. We'll be back later this week with another episode. And, of course, y'all can catch the 2-minute drill Monday through Friday on our YouTube channel. Been scrolling across the bottom all episode. But until later this week, guys,